Alright, let's fade that down so we can talk about Goodbye Jimmy Reed, the song you just heard the opening of, and you are looking at legendary bluesman Jimmy Reed. Obviously, this is the man that Dylan honors with this, his sixth track from 2020's masterful Rough and Rowdy Ways. But this is Bob Dylan we're talking about, so there's a lot more going on, and it's not easy to figure out, but we'll try. First, though, Jimmy Reed was an electric blues icon. He influenced the Rolling Stones, Elvis, all kinds of people, Dylan, obviously. He had a lot of big hits, but is not remembered in the popular consciousness the way that, say, B.B. King or others are. And his tale is kind of a sad one, but we'll get to that. Let's dive right in. I live on a street named after a saint. Women in the churches wear powder and paint. Where the Jews and the Catholics and the Muslims all pray, I can tell a proddy from a mile away. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed indeed. Give me that old-time religion, it's just what I need. So that's our first stanza, and it sets the tone for the song, which is this bizarre hybrid because there's a lot of religious, and especially, as Dylan says, old-time religious overtones in a song dedicated to a man who was not religious. Jimmy Reed was a hard-drinking bluesman who never recorded any gospel songs or anything like that. Meanwhile, I'm showing you pictures of Jerusalem here, where the Jews and the Catholics and the Muslims all pray. Christians in general, of course, not just Catholics, but that's the line in the song. Here's the Western Wall, and Bob Dylan has been there. Here's the proof. But basically take that dichotomy that we talked about, right, this old-time religion, with a constant return to Jimmy Reed himself at the end of each stanza, and then add in a heavy dose of either Dylan autobiographical comments or things that sound like Dylan autobiographical comments that are actually about Jimmy Reed. Put all that in a pot, boil it up, and that is this song. Yet another one that, honestly, only Bob Dylan could write. Writers have expressed puzzlement at the construction of this song and just how in the world Dylan is uniting these things, what got him to do that, what inspired this song. Some claiming it's such an eclectic mix that there's just no organizing principle behind this song at all. Well, I think that's completely wrong, as you can imagine, and I have a hypothesis about an organizing principle that I haven't seen anybody else posit, but we'll get to that later. This image, by the way, is not from Jerusalem. It's from an ancient monastery in Armenia. The second stanza follows the template of the first. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. It's from the Lord's Prayer, of course. Go tell it on the mountain, go tell the real story. Tell it on the mountain could be a reference to Moses, a Negro spiritual, which there's no doubt Dylan knows, I'm sure, by heart, and even a James Baldwin book of that title that has religious overtones. The next couplet has a great classic Dylan pairing. Tell it in that straightforward, puritanical tone in the mystic hours when a person's alone. Dylan, as I've pointed out a lot of times, goes to a lot of trouble, consciously or unconsciously, to make lines rhyme in more than the simplistic, just last sound sense. Puritanical tone, persons alone. The last two words in both of those lines match because the first word in each case starts with a P and the second word ends with the own sound. Final couplet returns to Jimmy Reed, as they always do. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, Godspeed. Thump on the Bible, proclaim the creed. The third stanza is really interesting because it's a big pivot, and it starts this biographical and or autobiographical synthesis that is at the heart of what Dylan's doing here, and I haven't noticed any other critic postulate this. Dylan sees himself in Jimmy Reed and sees how he could have turned out if he hadn't found religion. More on that later. You won't amount to much, the people all said, 'cause I didn't play guitar behind my head. Never pandered, never acted proud, never took off my shoes and threw them into the crowd. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, goodbye and good night. I'll put a jewel in your crown. I'll put out the light. Is Dylan talking about himself, Jimmy Reed, or both with the you won't amount to much? I think probably both. We're looking at Jimi Hendrix, of course, playing the guitar behind his head. That's something that Jimmy Reed never did, certainly not Dylan either. Jimmy Reed was a very influential blues guitarist, but as I understand it, he wasn't considered the flashiest guitarist at all. Meanwhile, other blues legends of the time, of course, did play the guitar behind their head, long before Hendrix. Why in the world are we looking at Justin Bieber? Because an astute observer noted that never took off my shoes and threw them into the crowd could possibly relate to this Bieber incident, where he threw his very expensive sneakers into the crowd and, they got auctioned off for a lot of money and whatever. Also calls to mind a funny story where somebody told Dylan, I think 2 albums ago, that Justin Bieber couldn't play any of the songs from your new album. And Dylan, who is actually a master of the comeback, immediately said, well, I couldn't play any of the songs from his new album either. He's got much better ones than that, by the way, but that just relates here, and I like the generosity of spirit that he shows. Recall that the final line here is, I'll put a jewel in your crown, I'll put out the light. That references this insignia from Jimmy Reed's guitar. They threw everything at me, everything in the book, had nothing to fight with but a butcher's hook. That's a biographical note about Jimmy Reed because he worked in a meatpacking plant in Chicago. And you're looking at the famed Chicago stockyards from around the time that Jimmy Reed was there. They have no pity, they don't lend a hand, and I can't sing a song that I don't understand. Notice then how Dylan, in these two couplets, these 4 lines, seamlessly transitions from the biographical about Jimmy to the autobiographical. The hook reference, obviously about Jimmy and not Dylan. Meanwhile, the I can't sing a song I don't understand, I think is clearly Dylan actually talking about himself. The stanza ends, goodbye Jimmy Reed, goodbye and good luck. Can't play the record 'cause my needle got stuck. Well, the good luck might refer to this here. Jimmy Reed was Mr. Luck. Dylan uses repetition of sound so much to string things together. Notice goodbye Jimmy Reed, goodbye, and good luck. Can't play the record 'cause my needle got stuck. So you get the G sound 4 times in those 2 short lines. Meanwhile, good luck and got stuck is the same device we talked about with puritanical tone and persons alone. Again, going to extra trouble to make 2 lines match up by, doing more than just making sure the last sounds rhyme. Lastly, can't play the record because my needle got stuck, maybe a sexual reference. Dylan is quite old at this point and maybe brave enough to deal with the fact that things don't work the way they used to. Reminds me of a line from Love and Theft. I got my hammer ringing, pretty baby, but the nails ain't going down. At the bottom of the next set of lyrics, we'll see the device I've talked about twice already, a 3rd time in this song. So long and so wrong. Anyway, this penultimate stanza might be the most overlooked in the different commentaries on the song, and I think it's probably the most important in the song. Transparent woman in a transparent dress. It suits you well, I must confess. I'll break open your grapes. I'll suck out the juice. I need you like my head needs a noose. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed. Goodbye and so long. I thought I could resist her, but I was so wrong. Obvious body reference there, right? B-A-W-D-Y and B-O-D-Y. And this can easily seem like just off-the-shelf blues, an obsession with a woman, her not being good for you even though you're obsessed with her. And Dylan has used that standard blues convention a lot in his career, but is there more going on? Well, as you can imagine, I definitely think there is. The god Dionysus was, of course, fond of grapes and wine and partying, and you can see here grapes being broken open for him so he can have the juice. That may be far more than a coincidental and theoretical connection. Jimmy Reed, I mentioned he was hard drinking earlier. He was so hard drinking that he drank himself into the grave by 50. Sadly, he was a hardcore alcoholic, and his struggles with alcohol are probably the reason he never achieved the lasting fame of a B.B. King. When the interest of young white people like Bob Dylan revived the blues, I wouldn't say revived, but, sparked a brand new interest from a new audience in them, a lot of old bluesmen had a renaissance in their career, which was great for them. And Jimmy Reed missed out on most, if not all of that, because he could not stay sober. He would forget his own lyrics. He would have to be literally propped up, while he played. Now let's go back to the start of this stanza. Transparent woman in a transparent dress. It suits you well, I must confess. So a transparent dress, hey, we get it, right? Wink, wink. That makes sense. But transparent woman in a transparent dress? If you think about it, you would see right through that. You wouldn't even get to see the woman. Could it be that she's transparent in a metaphorical sense? Well, it could be, and that'd be a clever line. Transparent woman in a transparent dress, like he knows what she wants. But I think there's more going on because this stanza seems to me to be about alcohol, temptation, and death, the story of Jimmy Reed's life. So wouldn't an alcohol bottle, a full one like this, be a transparent woman, this object of temptation? Wouldn't that be a clever way to describe the quote-unquote woman in Reed's life? It makes a lot more sense then, because this woman is leading to death, right? I need you like my head needs a noose. And as these images here show, people have long associated the noose with alcohol. It's not a difficult association to make in kind of an old world context, right? Dylan has been fairly obsessed with the classical world at this late stage of his career in his lyrics, so I think the Dionysus, or Bacchus, the earlier god, the Greek god, really does make a lot of sense with the grapes line, and then all of this just kind of ties together in that sense. Now, one person noted, very interesting, that one of Bacchus's priestesses was popularly depicted in art wearing transparent clothing. Was Dylan aware of that? Is that part of what he's referencing here? Definitely could be, but I think the greater point is, again, the woman is actually alcohol. I thought I could resist her, but I was so wrong. Last line of this stanza. Bob Dylan had his own struggles with alcohol, and other drugs, obviously, but those close to him always said alcohol was the number one temptation. I'm not aware of him ever giving up alcohol cold turkey, but he definitely got it under control. The reason I say I'm not sure if he ever gave it up is because I remember recently, didn't he drink champagne with the Nobel Committee? And was Dylan's finding religion, his very famous conversion, but forget the fact that he was quote unquote converting, just his finding religion, part of his sobering up? I think so. Every Grain of Sand, right in the middle of his overtly religious music period, talks explicitly about resisting temptation, old temptations. Now let's get back to the use of language and the final stanza. God be with you, brother dear. If you don't mind me asking, what brings you here? Oh, nothing much. I'm just looking for the man. I came to see where he's lying in this lost land. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, and everything within ya. Can't you hear me callin' from down in Virginia? First off, notice that this stanza starts with the letter G, right? God be with you. Every other stanza starts with a different sound, but every other stanza's last couplet begins with the word goodbye, the G sound. So now, for the first time in the song, a stanza begins with that same, usually ending sound. And this is the kind of thing Professor Christopher Ricks has talked about a lot. Dylan gives you these very subtle clues that a song is about to end, something much more subtle than, oh, the bridge is over, here comes another verse. Clearly it's the last verse of the song, just typical conventional songwriting. Need further evidence that Dylan, consciously or unconsciously is doing this? Look up goodbye, the most common word in the song, right? And like we said, it starts closing every stanza, meaning, the first of the last two lines, start of the couplet. Look up goodbye in an etymology guide. It's a contraction of God be with you, which starts this final stanza. So it is not just the G sound, it's that Dylan is cleverly disguising the word goodbye, the word that closed every other stanza. He's using it again to close the song, but in a way you would not notice, because God be with you, to our modern ears, has nothing to do with goodbye, but it actually does. I'm just looking for the man. I came to see where he's lying in this lost land. Here is Jimmy Reed's grave. Another repetition of a different trick this time. Remember the G sound 4 times in just 2 lines? Where here it's the L. Looking for the man, I came to see where he's lying in this lost land. How intricate can you get with your songwriting? Well, more intricate still, because this is the only closing couplet that does not repeat the G sound. Every other one is something like, goodbye, Jimmy Reed, goodbye and so long. Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, goodbye and good luck 3 times, right? Goodbye, Jimmy Reed, goodbye and good night 3 times. Here, goodbye, Jimmy Reed, and everything within you. The fact that you don't get repetition of the G sound in that first line of the last couplet again tells you the song is ending. The final line, can't you hear me calling from down in Virginia, direct reference to this song and an album. All of that hidden in what seems to be a straightforward but very odd, because of the religious overtones, tribute to an old blues legend. Sounds very much like a Chuck Berry-esque type song. David Hidalgo of Los Lobos played on this album, and luckily for us, he mentioned the recording this song, and he said, quote, "It started out like a Jimmy Reed tune, and it ended up, Bob was playing organ. He started this riff, and it went from this completely other thing to what it is now. It was fun to be in the room when it happened," end quote. And this is something amazing we've heard from other Dylan recording partners, that he kind of walks in with the idea of a song and maybe some scraps of notes and disjointed lyrics, and basically hammers out a song in the studio, creates the song there, doesn't just record it. Now let's get really nuts and go back to the religiosity of this song. If you research as crazily as me, then you'll realize there is another Jimmy Reed from kind of the exact same part of Mississippi where our Jimmy Reed is from. This is someone who's still alive, and it's a Christian author. And I found out, and it wasn't easy because there's not a lot of information about this guy at all, but his father bought a farm in the exact town in Mississippi, I'm sure it's still a one-horse town, where Jimmy Reed was born in the early 20s, mid-20s. This author grew up there, or in that exact same part of Mississippi at least, so they have a connection in name and geography. And then this book that I just showed you, which seems like the only notable one this guy's written. I think he's a teacher, and he writes articles. So he has written other things, but again, the book seems to be the main bullet point on his writer's resume. So what's this book about? It's about a young white boy, him, who is mentored by an old black man out amidst those cotton fields. And those cotton fields, as you can see here, with the author describing, were in, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Dunleith, Mississippi, and that's exactly where Jimmy Reed was born. That was back in 1953. It started then, and the two, in musician Jimmy Reed's heyday. And interesting, so the old black man became a spiritual mentor to this writer. And how do we bring all this back to Bob Dylan? Well, Bob Dylan is one of many young white kids who looked up to old black musicians. And it is at least possible that Dylan stumbled across this confluence, this other Jimmy Reed from that part of Mississippi, from the exact same place in Mississippi, and that might have had something to do with this song and the overt religiosity of it. And Dylan, we know, does take from the most obscure of sources like Confessions of a Yakuza, and God, we could name examples all day long. And regardless, it's a really interesting coincidence, right? So we have Christian author Jimmy Reed thanking an old black man for mentoring him spiritually, and we have Bob Dylan thanking the musician Jimmy Reed from the exact same place for mentoring him in the blues. Not directly, of course. Okay, well, I saved the craziest, most speculative part for last. Either way, I think you will agree that the song absolutely has an organizing principle, and a really interesting one. And it's one that I think holds water regardless of whether or not this Jimmy Reed possible connection here has anything to it or not. You don't need that. As always, Dylan's simpler seeming songs can be quite complex. There you go. Go listen to this song. Go listen to some old Jimmy Reed tunes, which I'm sure is what Bob would want, and enjoy.